Hello. I thought you might be interested in a lady called Christine Gauthier, who was in the Invictus Games and is a Paralympian, as you can see. She got her injuries in the Canadian Army, serving her country. Now she was 10 years in the Canadian Armed Forces and represented her country in 2016, the Rio Paralympics there. And then, in the wake of the recent Canadian laws to do with euthanasia, Miss Gauthier is quite happy being alive, I might say, or Mrs. Gauthier, sorry. She submitted a request for disabled equipment in 2018. That is, she needed a chairlift to get her up the stairs. And she said she was talking to whoever it was who was not providing the stairlift. And I said, I just can't keep going like this. I can't keep living like this. This has to be done. This has to be resolved. Whereupon the answer that came to her was, you know, Madame Gauthier, if you really feel you can't go on like this, if you feel you can't do it anymore, you know, you have the right to die. And I was so disturbed by that story, I forgot to tell you who I was, so I'm interrupting myself to remind you that I'm Graniopteryx on YouTube, Rumble, BitChute and Minds, and all the links are in the description, as are links for donation sites if you wish to use them. But if you don't, just clicking that like button is extremely helpful. Please like this video, please share it, please subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube. Also, click the notification button. Right, back to the terrible mess that is Canada right now. Apparently, Mrs. Gauthier was surprised by this answer. She shouldn't have been, because it was quite obvious where it was going. Disabled people are a drag on the economy. They take money from other more deserving cases. I mean, when you're disabled, your life has ended anyway. Why would you want to carry on? She said, I can't believe after all this time, not only will you not give me the equipment I need to live, but you will help me die. No, she's being overkind to them here. What she should have said, you just offered to murder me. Because that's what they were doing. Just stop bothering me. Stop asking for chairlifts and equipment. Who cares if you were a soldier and was injured being a soldier defending the country that I'm living in now so comfortably? Just go away and die. Well, that's what was being said to her, wasn't it? Let's have a look further down. A projection by the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition estimates that 13,500 people chose to end their lives with government help in 2022. The Canadian government is turning into a mass murderer. Now, I know there are problems. There are always heart-wrenching stories in the papers showing people who are in awful pain and terrible distress, and they want to die, like in somewhere like Britain, there's no one to help them. They end up going to Switzerland. And everybody says how terrible that is. But this is terrible too. And the problem is, there's always going to be a loser here. There's always going to be either someone in pain or someone not in pain who's going to be murdered by the state because they can't do anything else. Because the state won't help them, won't do anything for them, and is just suggesting, you know, get out of my governmental hair. And it is a serious philosophical problem. But that's why you shouldn't have euthanasia laws. Sorry. Legislators in the UK are considering a private member's bill which is at the moment in the House of Lords, which would legalise euthanasia. No, no. Dr. Conyer Troughton, an advocate for euthanasia and a physician who administers and assesses assisted suicides, backs the expansion. Dr. Troughton, who spent decades working in an abortion centre before getting involved in assisted dying, told the Daily Telegraph, when the legislation came through on assisted dying, it was the same year that we got mifepristone. I don't know what drug that is. Oh, it's a drug that people can take for abortion. So I didn't need to do that stuff anymore, says Dr. Troughton. So now I'm going on to dealing with killing fully grown people instead. The physician is not concerned about the expansion of the euthanasia legislation to include disorders such as depression, saying, having watched over the last couple of years how people with incurable illness, disease or disability that's not terminal access medical assistance in dying, I'm quite reassured that the level of scrutiny and the level of assessment is very tight. Well, Dr. Troughton, how about what was just said to Mrs. Gautier then? Do you reckon that's a tight level of assessment? No, it's the first and last resort of the lazy governmental system, of the lazy bureaucrat who can't be bothered. I mean, why should I shovel papers around getting this woman her chairlift when, if she dies, all I've got to do is sign a death certificate? Much simpler. That's where euthanasia laws end up. And they end up with greedy relatives pressuring old and disabled people to accept medical assistance in dying as well, because there's so much trouble to look after. And then the inheritance is being whittled away in their care fees. I am put in mind of the fifth commandment. I don't know whether I've mentioned this before. I've certainly mentioned it to somebody before. And it was the fifth commandment goes something like, honour your father and your mother. But it doesn't stop there. It's one of the few occasions when God actually explains the rule. I mean, most of the time God just says, do it. But this time God gave a reason. Honour your father and your mother, it says, and then continues, that your days might be long upon the land that God has given you. Now, it didn't say that you'd have eternal life or anything. It said that you will have a good and well taken care of life on the land that you're living on. In other words, you're going to have a reasonable life. And there are several reasons for saying that. And the first is, if you kill your parents, you can never be sure that your kids won't kill you. And the other thing is that senior people of any sort have experience, especially, of course, in a situation where few people knew how to read. Older people were the repositories of tribal knowledge. They were the ones who knew what happened the last time a kid had a rash like that, or how to set a broken bone, or where the best trails were for hunting, or whatever it was. When you start getting rid of inconvenient people, you're getting rid of resources, even if it's only the resources that come from learning how to care for disabled people. You are getting rid of an important part of our society. And Canada is just throwing everything out. Democracy, freedom of speech, and now its own people. Well, it always ends up there. That's what happened in Germany in the 30s as well. It started with rational ideas, or what were thought of as rational ideas, and it ended up with Germans killing a lot of their own citizens. I'm not just talking about Jews. I'm talking about disabled people of various sorts, and it would have gone on to even more if they'd have been given half the chance. Okay, well, yep. That's my comment about Canada. Canada, you should be ashamed of yourself Ashamed because you're voting for somebody like Trudeau. Ashamed because you're voting for politicians who will vote for this stuff. You should be ashamed. One of the nicest, politest countries in the world is turning into one of the most viciously immoral countries I could think of on the list of viciously immoral countries. Okay, till next time. Why not treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of merch? The mugs and t-shirts come in the Graniopteryx design or Grambo with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. Go to www.graniopteryx.com and whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share.